All right, so in this workshop, I want to take a deep dive into how to successfully delegate when you're trying to assign tasks to your team or projects as a whole. All right, so my first tip, and this is super high level, but make sure you get and actually use a project management system. So, a couple quick tips. My top three favorite are going to be Asana, ClickUp, and Monday. The biggest question that comes around this is which one do I use? And so obviously there's a lot more nuance than what I have on the screen, but my basic rule of thumb is use Asana if your world revolves around projects. If you're, this is a project and I have a portfolio of projects and I need project status updates and I need project progress and everything's a project, Asana is going to be a great fit. On the other hand, with Monday, if you have a linear workflow or you're used to working in spreadsheets, Monday might be a really good option because you can go from a spreadsheet to Monday, which has project management features. And it's not such a far stretch from spreadsheet all the way to like a full project management system. Now, very blanket statement, but for almost everything else, use ClickUp. So it's strong on the hierarchy. You have awesome features and project management tools. It's my favorite of the three, and it's the one that I use currently. Again, there's a lot more detail that can go into this, and I'll talk about this in another workshop. But at least try, if you're not using one of these, at least get in, log in, get the demos, try it out, see what you like, see what you don't like. Reach out to me if you have questions. I'm happy to share ideas on what each of these would be good for and what they look like. And I also have a number of tools that will help you answer some questions and figure out between Asana, ClickUp, and Monday, which one's the right one for you. All right. Big, huge rule of thumb here. But to begin delegating, make sure all your delegatable tasks, including all of your tasks, are in your project management system. So this is going to mean no notebooks, no Post-its around your monitor, no slips of paper in your pocket or notes and other apps in your phone. Whichever project management system you use, keep using that and put all of your tasks and all of your work in there. The other big rule of thumb to make all of this work that we're going to talk about today is that all the collaboration needs to be within your project management tools. If you have a Asana project or an Asana project and you're going to just create a checklist of things that need to get done inside of a project, and then you're communicating in Slack, that doesn't work. I mean, you have a glorified checklist over here, and then you have all this collaboration over here. Or maybe you jump into meetings on Zoom or huddles or wherever, but you want to try to get the majority, if not all of the collaboration and the communication inside your project management tool. So when you have tasks and you have questions about tasks and you collaborate on tasks, you do it in the task. Same thing for projects, same thing for teams. All of those elements that are already mapped out in your project management tool, try to collaborate into there, because then you have the work that's getting done and the collaboration that revolves around that work. And it just works seamlessly, just so much better. Okay, this one's a huge one, and it's very difficult at first, I think, to kind of wrap your head around, well, what is a complete request? But the first thing that you want to identify here is, and I was guilty of this for years as well, is creating tasks that are just a task name. We're going to go in and we're going to create a task, and then I'm going to put it in a project or a board or a list, and it's going to magically get done. But then I would get frustrated because it didn't magically get done. In fact, nothing got done because I didn't actually give it any exceptional information. Sometimes I even didn't assign it to somebody. I just expected somebody to see it and start doing the work. Doesn't work like that. So to make a complete request, the first thing would be to figure out what are the components of a task when you delegate. Now, this template that I'm about to share is going to work for almost any task. You could edit this, of course, change it. But the first thing that you want to look at is you have a task, that's going to be your task name, but then why are we doing this task? And this task and purpose opens up a huge opportunity for autonomy for the person that you're delegating work to. Because if you ask them just to do something and they don't know why they're doing it, they can't make any great decisions about it. If you give them a task to do and then you say, here's why we're doing it, then they can mentally and intelligently and autonomously start making decisions about, oh, okay, I get why I'm doing this. That means I shouldn't do this. I should do this. And it just opens up that whole opportunity for the assignee to understand with just one sentence of why are we doing this. The next piece is the deliverable. So I've changed this name over the course of the years, but this is what I've settled on now. Just identifying the deliverable of the task. Is it a Google Doc? Is it a spreadsheet? Is it a PowerPoint? Is it a web page? Whatever it is, just define it. That's going to help so much for the person who gets assigned a task to know, what am I supposed to create here? In what format? In what structure? Etc. All right, related resources. So this is going to be things, let's say it's a client request. Well, the client might have shared a spreadsheet. Put the spreadsheet in here so that it's part of the task, so that the person that you delegate the task to doesn't have to search everywhere to find this spreadsheet, or worse, ask you where the spreadsheet is. And the last piece of this template for creating complete requests is adding a video explanation. This I'll touch on in an upcoming slide, but this is so useful. Just like you're watching me explaining this, you don't have to do a whole slide deck and everything, but if you record a quick loom, even if it's 1 minute or 2 minutes, just describing what we're talking about here, the task, the purpose of the task, the deliverable, the resources, why we're doing it, any insight you might already have, you can contribute and share so much information in this type of format over just text that can be misconstrued or very ambiguous. A video explanation, 5 minutes or less, awesome. Definitely give this a try. I'll talk more about it in a second as well. All right, so the last point that I want to make on making complete requests is, even though it took me a little bit of time to explain all of this, it doesn't take that much time. Yes, it definitely adds time when you're creating tasks, and that can feel like a slowdown. But if you take a step back and think about how much back and forth you have, how many email threads, how many Slack messages, how many Teams messages, how many things aren't getting done, how many roadblocks were created because this information wasn't shared in the forefront. So even if you're adding 5 to 10 minutes to create a task, you're easily saving 30 minutes. And most definitely, you're probably going to save hours, sometimes per delegated task. Okay, I love this. Set the definition of done. This is one of my most simple but most powerful pieces of advice here. And all this is saying is, if we have a project or if we have a task and it's delegated and you want somebody else to do it, simply define what that means for it to be completed. Now, the deliverable in the previous slide is a little similar to this, and it can contribute to this, right? You could define the deliverable as part of the definition of done. But once you say, this is what it means for this task to be done, or this is what it means for this project to be done, then again, you're opening up the autonomy for your team to start making better decisions by themselves without having to go to you for everything. All right, this whole aspect of this is just really, what's the objective that we're trying to complete here? When would we consider this complete? Now, there's not much to this, honestly. Having a crappy, poorly written definition of done is still better than no definition of done. But if you could improve it at all, I would aim for a sentence or less. I would keep it really clear and concrete. And concrete is an interesting word that when I think about how do we shape words and how do we think about language and communication. But in my perspective, when I try to keep things concrete, I want to make sure that I have a phrase or a sentence, or in this case, a definition of done that anybody can read. There's no ambiguity. Everybody that reads it will know exactly what I mean. So that's what I aim for. I don't spend hours writing this. This is 3 seconds. But as you practice this, you'll want to think about these elements, this criteria here, just to make sure that it's all something that conveys the actual definition of done. Okay, this one's huge. Establishing the priority. So, there's variations of this, but when there's no priority, everything's a priority. And the concept here is, as a founder, as a leader, as a CEO, as, any other style manager, when you're delegating tasks, if you ask somebody to do task A and they're working on it, and then you ask them to do task B, they're going to go, okay, I guess I'll stop task A and go to task B. And then while they're trying to figure that out, you give them task C, and then they're going, okay, task A and task B and task C. If you don't establish the priority, the person that you're delegating to just wants to make you happy. They're just trying to figure out what they're supposed to do, but they have no idea which one is the right one. So you definitely need to take a second, go, okay, task A, not urgent. Don't worry about it. Just getting it into your purview, not a big deal. This is low priority. Task B, normal priority. If we get this done in the next week, we're good to go. But task C, this just came in. This is a rush. This is from the client. We need something done by the end of today. This is urgent. All right. Once those are established, then the person that you're assigning these tasks to can go, okay, I'm good on task A. Cool. I'm good on task B. I'm not going to do that right now. Task C, I'm going to tackle right now. I'm going to get that done. Then I'm going to go to task B, and then I'm going to go to task A. And in that simple 2-second thing where you just establish the priorities, and all the project management tools have the ability to establish priorities, use it. I don't see it used as often as it should be, especially right out of the gates, but with a little bit of training, this is just a massive improvement to being able to delegate. All right, task statuses. Now, ClickUp has task statuses built in. Monday has a column for statuses. Asana, you have to add a custom field. That's a drop down to create task statuses. But regardless of the tool that you use task statuses, because the reality is when you're delegating and when you're creating tasks, it's more than just, hey, this task is either done or not done. There's a lot that I could go into for this, but what you want to do is essentially build a system around task statuses. This is going to make your delegation so much stronger, so much easier. And here, I'll kind of get into this next section, but it gives you the opportunity to jump in and say, we're going to create a high-level dashboard. Okay, so task statuses, and I'll get to this list below here in just a second, but the idea gives you an opportunity to not have to micromanage so much. So instead of saying, okay, it's not done, but where's the status? What's going on with it? Task statuses give you clarity in that. And it's perfect for adding to dashboards so that you could see, oh, we've got these tasks that are in to-do status, these tasks that are in progress, these tasks need review, etc. However you want to structure it, it gives you the idea, or the element, and the ability to see everything at a much higher level across projects, across spaces or teams. Really, really powerful stuff. All right, so here's a basic template to follow to get in and start creating task statuses. So I have the task statuses, and then I have the definitions. And of course, you could change all of these up. You could rechange the wording. You could add a lot more. But the idea here is, let me get back to this. I don't know where our spotlight went. Is to define the requirements. This is actually the first status that I always use. The idea is that I've created the task, but don't do anything with it yet, because as the person delegating, I'm going to define the requirements. I'm going to put in the purpose. I'm going to put in the make it a complete request. I'm going to establish priorities, etc. All of those things happen here so that everybody on my team knows, oh, I don't have to worry about this yet. This is an optional one, but I like this idea where once the requirements are defined, Then you can set it into a scheduling status. And what that can trigger is the notice to your project manager saying, hey, this task has actually been fully defined. It's a complete request. It's ready to go. Now let's assign that to the right person. Let's schedule it out based on their capacity. It gives a nice, like, we're not working on this yet, but there's still an action that needs to be taken from a project management point of view. The next one is to do. So this is where it sits after it's been defined and after it's been scheduled. So now it's just waiting for the person who it's been assigned to get the time to work on it. When they start working on it, they're going to move the status to in progress. And that's going to indicate that they're now currently working on this task. The validation step, you might call this internal review, client review, validation, whatever you want to call it. The idea here is the assignee has done something. The person you delegated it to has worked on it. Now they need somebody else to review their work. It might be you, it might be somebody else on the team, but it goes into a validation status. All right, roadblock is an interesting one. This is what happens when somebody that's been delegated a task gets to a point that they can't work on it anymore. I don't know. I know the purpose and I have a whole complete request, but I'm missing information or there's a decision that I can't make. I need to escalate this. So this is going to be your escalation status that says, all right, it's a roadblock. How do we resolve this roadblock? The on hold status, this one is for maybe priorities change or something else has happened in the business or with the client. You're waiting for payment. You're going to want to put some tasks on hold. Create a status called on hold, move it into on hold, and everybody that was assigned to it just knows, oh, okay, cool. As a bonus, drop in a quick comment in your project management system, giving them the reason why it's on hold. And suddenly you don't even have any follow-up questions that need to be asked. You just put the task on hold, leave a comment, and the person that was assigned to it, cool. Now, if you've done all this correct so far, they would go to their task with the next highest priority. That would be the item that they would need to work on today without even thinking or asking, what do I work on now? All right, and then the final suggested task status would be completed. And this is simply once it's been worked on, once all the roadblocks have been removed, once it's been reviewed, if it needs to be, then it gets moved to completed, and that's a done task. All right, so a roadblock system, I touched on this in the last slide. This is essentially when it moves to a roadblock, what happens? I mentioned it a second ago, but this is, you can think of this like this is your escalation feature or how you escalate things. So one way to think about this is once it's moved to roadblock, right, then it needs to go to somebody else. Might be you, might be somebody else on your team. But what I would recommend is looking at setting up an automation. So when a task is moved to roadblock, that triggers, that status change, triggers an automation in your project management system that goes, oh, wait a second, we need to do something about this. And you could have it create a sub-item, a subtask, a new task. But the idea is whoever needs to resolve the roadblock should be getting a new task to resolve the roadblock. That's going to button up this whole system so that as it gets escalated, the person who it needs to get escalated to can actually understand, oh, I've got some work to do. What is this work about? Oh, it's related to this parent task or this related task. Oh, I know how to resolve this, or I can make this decision. You go in, leave a comment, collaborate in the system, move it from roadblock back to in progress, roadblock removed. This is super, super helpful, and it helps create, by creating the automation, it eliminates the possibility of dead ends where a whole bunch of tasks just sit in roadblock status. Now, you could do the same thing for in review. If somebody needs to review something or validate something, have the automation create a task or a subtask for the person that needs to review it. And then all of a sudden you have this like complete loop system for everything that needs to happen to work a task, a delegated task, all the way through your workflow. Oh, and one thing I would point out here, all of these statuses, This is essentially a micro workflow. It doesn't have to have every step, but you can kind of think of it almost as a linear progression. Of course, roadblock and on hold are the outliers. You'd move it into that status outside of a linear progression, but it's there. It's going from defining requirements, scheduling, to do, in progress, validation, etc. So you could, the easy way to think about this is, what is your workflow? What statuses need to be mentioned in the workflow to work through it? All right. So I'm using Loom to record this right now. If you haven't heard of Loom, get the free version. You can record up to 5-minute videos, but essentially it'll grab your camera if you want. It'll grab your screenshot. It'll grab your audio, and you can narrate just like this. So I mentioned this earlier in the workshop. But being able to record and communicate in this fashion, again, doesn't even have to be a slide deck. You could just be in your project management system, looking at the description of the task and talking through it. But by just communicating this way and having a conversation, albeit one-sided, with the person who you're delegating the task to, they can watch that video. Not only that, they can watch it at 2x. So if you record a 5-minute video explaining it, they can watch it in 2.5 minutes. And this is going to save so much time in that back and forth. And it takes a little bit of practice just to get the videos right, just to record it on the first take. I know when I first started recording Looms, it would take me 5 or 6 takes. I was so uncomfortable. I didn't want to talk to the camera. I didn't want to record myself. I didn't want to have the camera on, whatever. Practice a little bit. Don't stress yourself out. But even if you're not recording with the camera on and you're just recording your screen and you're narrating what you need the task to be done or how you need the task to be performed, the elimination of back and forth and the maximizing of the collaboration is just going to be huge here. Now, the flip side of this is to also train your team how to use Loom. So it could be knowledge transfer. They created something and they need to convey that idea to somebody else on the team, the next person who's going to tackle part of the task or the project, or even if it's for validation or reviewing what they did. Train your team member to record a walkthrough of what they built. Again, just describing it, sharing their screen, whatever it might be. If it's content or video or whatever it is, they can record all of that, share that with you, bring it back, and then for you to review, you're reviewing this in minutes. It's not, okay, I've got to read this book and I've got to like mentally, set aside some time for this. Watching a video makes it so easy. You're going to immediately see everything that they've done. You're going to be able to pinpoint what's working, what might not be working, where they need to improve it. You can actually leave comments right back in Loom. But what I would do, if you choose to do it that way, those comments are in context, but then back in your project management system, also leave a comment that said, left some comments in the Loom shared. The other benefit to this is they could do a walkthrough in 5 minutes, and just like you could communicate the task in a 5-minute video and they can watch it at 2x or 2.5 minutes, you can do the same thing. So when you're reviewing stuff, I turn on the captions, I turn it on 2x, and I am watching that review as quickly as possible. Because even if it's a 15-minute review or a 20-minute video that I need to review, I can watch that in 10 minutes. Saves so much time, and you're not losing any information. All right, so again, this is kind of like all the other little bits here. There's a little bit more time up front, but what you're saving is just massive amounts of time. So I'll move my little head here so that at a minimum, the idea is like you're absolutely saving hours a week doing this. No doubt in my mind, if you have to review what your team is doing from the tasks that you're delegating, you're saving hours. At best, you're also eliminating meetings, which is just nobody wants to keep doing meetings. All right, so let's get through here. Now, as all of this develops, there's a lot that we've covered so far, but there are just a whole bunch of little small things that you can implement. You don't have to do all of this at once. You don't have to build the whole system at once. Just start implementing pieces of these. One thing that really helps as you go through this is defining the definition of things. So we talked about priorities here, or just recently, clear definitions of statuses. If you don't define what this means, then a status that's scheduling or, on hold could mean something different to one person than another person. So it's so important that you write the definitions of things. If you have a status called on hold, does that mean you move it to on hold when you're waiting for a reply? Or as a leader, does that mean the task is on hold because we're waiting for a client to make payment? Who knows? Nobody will unless you define it. All right, priorities, same thing. Even though it sounds like, okay, low priority, high priority, normal priority, urgent, that all seems pretty clear, but I can guarantee it's not to everybody on your team. Does urgent mean I need to drop everything? Or does urgent mean I need to get it done in 24 hours? Or does urgent mean I just need to get it done this week? Until you define it, nobody will know what you're talking about. So all you have to do is write down the statuses, write down the priorities, and define it. It's very similar to what I have up here. Let me scoot all the way back. All right, so here, just like this, right? We've got a status and we've got a definition, status and definition. This is all you would need to do to communicate to your team what do each of these statuses mean and why do we use them. All right, let's get back into standard definitions. All right, statuses, priorities. Another big one is when would you, if you get a request and you're empowered with being able to create new request or tasks in your project management system, well, do you create it as a project? What's a project? Do you create it as a task? What's the definition of a task? When do you use subtasks? All of those things, unless you define them, will create mayhem and chaos across your organization. Same thing with custom fields. If you have fields, when do you use them? What are they for? What projects should they be included in? Do I have to fill them out for every task, etc.? Take an index of your custom fields, define them. It only takes a few minutes, saves you hours. All right, so again, I'll make it so we can see this, but essentially, I'm kind of going through the high level here, but as you go through your list and as you go through your projects and your tasks, you're going to start to identify, oh, wait a second, that could be misconstrued. That could be confusing. That could be ambiguous. Write it down, create a definition, train your team. That's what you're looking for to really make this whole system hum. All right, couple more slides. Next one is creating accountability. So this is both for you and yourself. And what this is going to do is create trust across the board, saying, all right, your team can trust you that you're going to be accountable with what you need to do. And likewise, you need to keep your team accountable with what you need them to do. And that's the only way to really create that high level trust between management and the teams. But start thinking about all the different ways that accountability can be created. One of the easiest is going to be leveraging dashboards. So that's going to take all the work that's getting done in your project management systems and bubbling that up into high-level views, metrics and charts and, the various elements, how do things fluctuate over time. But this is going to help shine a spotlight on maybe some pockets where there's not accountability. So leveraging dashboards is a huge piece. All the elements that I've mentioned in this presentation so far are all going to help create accountability. When you have the definitions, when you have statuses, when you have priorities, when you actually have delegation happening, when you have scheduling, all of that is going to help do this. My big piece of advice here is really think of yourself as a level playing field here. If you're asking your team to do it, would you also do it? Just something to kind of keep in mind. All right. This merits a whole workshop in itself on time tracking, but I do want to point out that from an accountability standpoint, both for yourself and for your team, it might be worthwhile having your team log how long it takes them to do the task that you're delegating, because in your mind, that might be a 30-minute task, but it takes 3 hours once they track their time on it. Well, what does that mean? Does that mean that they are the slowest employee ever and that they're 2.5 hours slower than they should be? Does that mean you weren't good at communicating what the task was about? Or did that mean that the task was actually a lot more complicated than you thought and you just didn't know all the nuances, but the people doing the work did? And so by just having that time tracked, you're able to say and see, oh, all right, let's see. I thought it was going to be 30 minutes, but it took 3 hours. Why? Collaborate on the task, ask the question, work with the person that you delegated the task to, and get a better understanding of what's going on. This is going to help you nip so many things in the bud that's going to help just improve your overall systems and efficiency. That, again, it's not about negative accountability. So it's not, hey, you should have done this in 30 minutes and now it's 3 hours, you're fired. It's why? Why didn't this happen in 30 minutes? And keep digging into that why to figure out what the heck is going on with my procedures, with my processes, with my systems, with my delegation. This is really, out of almost everything that I've talked about today, is going to be your clear indicator. Pairing this with the dashboards, it's going to be awesome. Okay, SOPs, or standard operating procedures. This is, again, one of the most powerful tools that you have. Now, when you hear that, I think everybody maybe conjures up a slightly different image in their head. I tend to think about the long, black and white, boring, super big documents where I need to read and understand every aspect of what's going on. I don't find that works in today's workforce. Maybe it's just me, but I prefer to keep them really, really simple. And just like I can iterate on this. I don't have to have the perfect SOP the first time. Just simply define what you need to get done. So here's the framework that I use as a starting point for every SOP. Now, the whole purpose of this is if I'm going to delegate a task and I don't tell somebody how it needs to get done or how I want it done, then the delegation isn't going to work. No matter how many other elements of this system we have together, it's still going to be a struggle. This is going to button it all up and help the person that's getting the task understand exactly what to do. So the simple framework to start just with a very easy SOP, give it a nice clear title, start with something like how to, and then fill in the blank. Give it a short description. Just say, this is when you would use the SOP. Here's why you would use this SOP. Make sure that the person reading this SOP can look at that and go, oh yeah, I'm reading the right thing. I would always, or as much as possible, include a simple diagram. You're not winning an art contest here. Doesn't matter exactly what it looks like, but can somebody visually look at the workflow of how this SOP or this procedure needs to work so that they can understand what to do? Having the visual versus having a linear step-by-step document is a night and day difference. Now, huge on video. So again, record a video of how all this works that's following this visual flow, and you have yourself a super powerful SOP. That's all you need to start. Just start giving your team this, and then they can reuse it and organize it in a way where they know that they can find it and know where to look. And you're going to eliminate those repeat questions right off the bat. Now, one thing that you can do, because everybody's a different type of learner, and you don't always just want a video, is grab the video transcript from your video that you recorded right here, send it to ChatGPT, and ask it to create a step-by-step document for you. Done. Copy that, put all of this in a document. Now you have the title, the description, the visual process map. You've got a video showing how it could be done, and you have your written step-by-step that's now searchable. This sounds like a lot. It's not. I promise you, you can do this in 5 to 10 minutes. Just knock these out. Train your team on where to find it. I like having a ask the knowledge base first, with the idea being, if you have a question, don't ask a human, ask the knowledge base. Only if you can't find the answer in the knowledge base do you then ask somebody in Slack or go up to their desk or however you want to ask them. And the last piece to this workshop is getting feedback. So if you're not having one-on-ones, start scheduling one-on-ones with the people that you delegate it to. This is a lot less about you and what you want to convey to them, and a lot more about what they need to convey to you. Because most of the time, your team is not going to tell you what you actually need to hear unless you listen and create an open environment for them to do it. So a few tips here. Find out how they're doing personally, professionally. whatever they want to share, let it, obviously within HR reasons here, but let them open up and start being able to tell you. Because if you find out how they're doing, if you find out how you can improve as a leader to make their job easier, find out what roadblocks there are, find out, of the systems that you have, what's working, what's not working, what are things that they wish they had. Again, I just mentioned this with making their lives easier. This is really work lives, right? So what's cumbersome, what's slowing them down, all of those things, people will open up if you ask, but they're rarely going to open up if you don't ask. There's going to be a select few members of your team who are going to be very loud about this type of stuff. But unless you're hearing from everybody, you're only getting a piece of the puzzle. Now, this one's more personality traits, but sometimes you'll be delegating things to people that don't mesh well with their personality. So they're going to do it because you asked them to do it, but they're going to do it begrudgingly. They're going to do it in a way that, okay, I'm just going to get this done. I don't want to do this, but all right, it's part of my job. Right, but if you open up and really understand what they like to do and what they don't like to do and what fits their personality and what doesn't, you might get a little better at delegating to the right person to understand skill sets and personality, so that instead of delegating something and going, oh my, gee, this is terrible, right? You delegate it to a different person on your team and suddenly they love that type of work. And now the results are like way beyond your expectation and everybody's happier. All right. And the final piece here is don't act on everything, or don't feel like you have to act on everything. Collect the data in your one-to-ones, get the feedback, let it merge around in your head and rumble a bit, and then have some things surface to the top. Maybe there's one or two things that you act on. But if you're starting to do one-on-ones and you feel like as a manager you need to act on everything, you're going to spend your entire day trying to make everybody happy, which is never going to happen. No, your entire team is not always going to be happy. It's impossible. So act on the certain things that will improve the business, that will improve the team, that will generate more revenue, that will make delegation easier. Whatever it is in the feedback, that's your art form as a leader to say, this makes a little bit more sense to act on, but I've got these other ideas that are swirling around in the back of my head that I might work on in a little bit. But let me see how it plays out, and let's let the system breathe a little bit, etc. All right, so that's the end of the workshop on how to improve delegation and just how to delegate and build a system for delegation in general. I'm around. Reach out with any questions. I would love to hear from you. Thank you so much for watching. I hope this was helpful.